Gonna go live now on Facebook. Yep. Preparing to go streaming live. Saura TV. We are live with
Recording
Jim.
in progress.
Voice doing that for me. We are live. I think Jim, your both account are making the echo.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
get you guys up
Thank you.
in a session so I can look at you.
Saura TV. We are
Just
live
hang us.
with Jim Clancy from Georgia, United States, and Wissam Yafi from Washington, D.C. We're going to cover, thank you for being with us. So, in this special day, we're going to start with, we're going to cover three topics today: the global hit, the global hit on Iran, the regional, and we're going to speak about local local area on Lebanon and Gaza and so on. I'm going to start with you, Jim. Is your sound, is your equipment, or everything is okay? You can start. I'm going to start with you, Jim, about
Yes,
the
we
global
should be
hit,
good.
about the war in the war in Iran. Like we were saying, you start the war, you don't know how it ends. What's your take on that, and
Yeah, well,
how you
that
see what's go what? Yes, go ahead.
Tarek, that is the big question. You know, as we all look at this, we're hearing all kinds of noises coming from all corners of the world. And the fundamental question, I think that the Iranians, the Americans, the Israelis, everybody wants to know the answer to, and nobody has, is are we at the beginning of this? Or are we at the end? Was that U.S. strike on Fordo the end of it? You know, they've declared they have obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program. Well, it didn't have a nuclear weapons program, so I guess you could say that that was true. It's not there because it wasn't there to begin with. At the same time, we already know that they hadn't even done the bomb damage assessments. We know that. And so they have no idea. When Trump came out, and Hegseth came out, the Secretary of Defense, claiming we've obliterated their nuclear program, that was nothing more than triumphalism and wishful thinking because they hadn't seen bomb damage assessments. It's a very difficult thing, especially when we're talking about targets that are buried so deep below the ground. And that's why they brought in those big bunker busting bombs. What they actually accomplished, not so clear. It's pretty clear they could have blocked the entrances. There were two known entrances there to the Fordo facility. They hit some other nuclear sites that were linked to Iran's nuclear program, not nuclear weapons program, nuclear program enrichment. And we saw that they were devastated. Those were surface targets, though. What actually happened underground, we just don't know. We have been told that there was no trace of radioactive material coming from the site. Now, that could mean a lot of things. That could mean that, you know, they didn't hit the target, or it could mean that there was nothing there when they hit the target. We simply don't know the answer to that. So, does this go on? If the U.S. was telling the truth, which, you know, this is going to be a stretch in and of itself, about what was its goal here? Was its goal to end the possibility of Iran getting a nuclear weapon? Well, if that's the case, we don't have an answer uh, because we didn't think with the intelligence reports that the U.S. was citing indicated that there was no nuclear weapons program to begin with. And of course, that all changed in the run up. We even had the director of national intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, saying that at the time, and then quickly she was repudiated by President Trump, and he said, "No, no, she's wrong. She's wrong. We had new intelligence. The Israelis gave us new intelligence, or we had our own new intelligence that told us that they were developing the bomb." Well, we haven't seen any evidence of that. Let's just leave it there because there's no other way to describe it. But we can say that this whole notion of we've obliterated it just doesn't wash because they haven't seen what were the actual effects. And now it's extremely unlikely that Iran is going to accede to IAEA inspectors to come in and take a look at the facility where they had all these centrifuges that were ramping up production of more highly enriched uranium. Uh, I can't imagine why Iran would say, yes, come in, I want you to do your bomb damage assessments up close and personal. Just doesn't seem like they're going to cooperate with that at all. And so it leaves us wondering how long will Netanyahu go ahead with his strikes on Iran? One thing we know from inside Israel is that this is a process, this ongoing war, this widening of the war, this involvement in the United States to help shield Israel, all enables keeping Netanyahu in office. And we can talk a lot about that coming up in the next 45 minutes or so. But that's the question right now. Is this the end of it? We're close to the end? Or is this just the beginning of a nightmare which is going to divide Trump supporters in the United States who definitely didn't want to see us get involved in another Middle East war? Or is it going to be something that can be relatively handled quickly, as I think President Trump really hopes? I don't think he's going to get his wish of an unconditional surrender by Iran. I don't think that's in the cards at all. But how much might Iran engage the United States in retaliation for the raids that it's carried out? They didn't seem to fire a single bullet or missile at the B-1B bombers that were coming in to drop those bunker busting bombs. There wasn't much resistance from the Iranians on that front. And we can talk about why that is a possibility. All right? So, gets us started, something to think about.
Wissam, what's
Well,
what's
I
your
tend to
intake?
concur with what Jim is saying, and I think there's two wars happening at this moment. There's the war, the nuclear war, and then there's the regional war. The nuclear war, which is for the stopping Iran from having nuclear weapons kind of war, that has its own dynamics on a global level. And then you have the regional war between Iran and Israel over regional hegemony. That has its own dynamics. I think, you know, the difficulty that Jim is expressing for many people in understanding what's going on is because kind of there's blurred lines between one war and the other war. The US is not really interested in the regional war. And there's a lot of resistance in the US against that region, against getting involved in that regional war, meaning yet another Middle Eastern war. They don't want to get involved with that kind of a war. But the US is clearly has, you know, as evidenced by the strikes, interested in the global element of the war. Now, the US interest on the regional side is for Israel to maintain its hegemony as much as possible. But I don't think the US is ready to kind of enter the war and boots on the ground as they did in Afghanistan and as they did in Iraq, et cetera, et cetera. That's out of the question. There's a lot of resistance here from the Democratic Party, from which Trump doesn't really care about, but from his own party, from the Republican Party, and from MAGA specifically, the Make America Great Again branch of the Republican Party against any form of a war. And so So he knows this, and I think, and he knows the costs that are involved with this. So regional war involvement by the US, I think, as long as Israel is not under threat of implosion, I think is out of the question. Now, if we go to the nuclear side of things, the US did its hit. There's a lot of suspicion, as Jim tended to say towards the end of his statement a minute ago, which is there was no, any resistance to the planes coming in and bombing. And so far, there seems to be no radiation. This tends to suggest one of two things. Either the Iranians knew that the US was going to hit, and in a way, they were forced to accept the hit. And so they moved the nuclear material, the uranium, out of the way. And there are pictures of trucks, getting ready to move it. And of course, these trucks, there are too many trucks for the load, because the load is only 400 kilograms. So it doesn't really require all these trucks. So they were not only moving trucks, they were moving what analysts are saying, or they were moving machinery as well. And then the other is for decoy, which they sent the trucks in many different directions so that, intelligence agencies which don't know where it went. Anyway, putting that part aside, you have also the fact that there was no resistance to any, to the planes flying. Now, realizing the B-2 bomber is stealth, but still, there has been resistance in the past, and there still is to this day. This morning, there were reports of Israeli flights over Iran being fired upon. So there's a lot of question marks on whether Iran knew that the hit was coming, and if they did, if that was some form of an implicit approval for the hit to happen. And so this tends to imply that the counter hit is not going to be major against the US, which tends to suggest that there would be de-escalation in that war, which is on the nuclear side. But then the regional war, you're still seeing tit for tat. Today, the Israelis hit Iran, Iran hit back with ballistics. That doesn't look like it's going to be de-escalating anytime soon.
What about the meeting today in Russia and the involvement in Russia with the Iranian? Today they met regarding the try to bring them to the negotiation table or try to make a deal regarding the nuclear facilities. That might lead to because of the relationship of Trump and the President Putin.
Well, you're looking at Donald Trump wants to be the center of any negotiations. I mean, he doesn't want the Europeans involved. He short-circuited after giving the Iranians 2 weeks to contemplate their next move. He hit them in 48 hours. So he's not interested in negotiations on one hand, but at the same time, if there are any negotiations, he wants to be the guy in the driver's seat. That's pretty clear. And he'll dismiss Vladimir Putin's efforts. I think he's already, the comments already come out that he should focus on a Ukrainian ceasefire rather than something with Iran. But Iran needs to reach out to one of its few final supporters and contacts. The Iranians have been supplying drones to the Soviets, I shouldn't say the Soviets, to the Russians in this battle with Ukraine. And so there's that link there. By the way, that hasn't really pleased the Iranian people a whole lot. At the same time, there's not much really that Moscow can do. It can rise up and say, well, you know what, we'll propose this. And it's pretty clear that Iran would like not to have to negotiate with Trump. They don't believe a word he says, nor should they. You've got two of the biggest liars on the world stage. On one hand, you've got Bibi Netanyahu. On the other, you've got Donald Trump. These guys, they don't know how to tell the truth. And so I think the Iranians feel that they can make the case that these aren't, this is a very difficult negotiation for them. And while they may see the need to reach out to the U.S. at some point, they already reminded the Trump administration look, we were at the negotiating table when you not only blew up the talks, you blew up our lead negotiator. So, they have that case to make in public. And I think, they will continue to do that. But they should be in no rush, one, to retaliate, or two, to get involved in any kind of direct talks. So you go to Moscow, tread water a little while.
Uh, do you think Netanyahu is dragging U.S. to the war three with in the region? Yeah, that's his plan
Well,
to drag the
he
U.S.
wouldn't mind that. He's trying to save his own skin. He's in it for himself very clearly and for his ideological goals. He sees this as a brilliant opportunity in Gaza to ethnically cleanse more than 2 million Palestinians while the world is worried about something else, and has obviously not shown much concern for the Palestinians themselves that are trapped there. All you need to do is look at that haphazard, the Hunger Games that has been launched by a joint Israeli US project to replace somehow UNRWA and the United Nations and the United Nations agencies in distributing food there. It's been a total disaster. It is resulting in the deaths of scores of people, if not hundreds, every single day. And it just can't be tolerated. It further highlights the allegations of genocide against this Israeli government. And the U.S. is getting dragged in on that because remember all of those bombs, and there have been the equivalent of several nuclear weapons that have been dropped on Gaza. All of those have made in USA printed on them. And he's already drawn the U.S. deeply into this. And to my mind, this is a riskier proposition for the United States than I think some of the politicians in Washington are ascribing to it. It's risky because it tears down all of the humanitarian law, all of the international norms that the United States has tried to hold up over the decades. Donald Trump's administration has ripped them to shreds, and that's got to be a major concern for people. What happens with the Iranians? I think most Americans right now are just hoping for the best, hoping that it is, as we said at the outset, we're seeing the end of this and not the beginning of something new. World War III, I don't think so. I don't think that the United States wants that. I don't think the Trump administration wants that. At least half of the supporters don't want that. And here's the real bottom line: the U.S. cannot afford it. Neither can the Israelis.
I'd
Uh,
like to address
but
Tarek's question on the geopolitics and add to what Jim said, which is so the Russians have fought a war that is very costly to them on their western border with Ukraine and with Europe in general and the West, if you want to put it in those terms. Very expensive, very costly in human lives, economic, etc. I don't think they're ready to give up on their southern border just yet that easily. So they're not going to kind of shut the perceived enemies away from the West only to allow them to come in from the south, which is Iran. Iran is to the south of the Russian border. And so Iran to them is a very important piece on the chessboard. For that purpose, I think that the Russians themselves are very keen on keeping the regime in place. Now, counterintuitively, I think the Americans are also not so keen on regime change for two reasons. One, because of the cost to the US. But the second reason is because it's the devil you know. They don't know what kind of a regime would replace the current regime. And so if you replace the current regime with something even worse, which often happens,
Recording in progress.
that becomes a major problem. So for those reasons, I don't think the U.S. is really keen. And the first thing that came out of President Trump's mouth, the first day is about regime change. And then tongue-in-cheek, a couple of days ago, he mentioned, or yesterday, he mentioned, yeah, why not MIGA, which is, make Iran great again with a regime change. I don't think that's a serious proposition. Netanyahu himself, I think, has gone a bridge too far with this one. if we go back to the regional war that we're talking about, the problem for Israel is it has no strategic depth whatsoever, except for an air bridge that it has with the United States, essentially. Without the United States, time and again over the past 2 years, Israel has proven itself to almost be a non-entity. At one point, Hamas had it on the ropes. Then Hezbollah had it on the ropes. Then the Houthis, and now Iran. And so, without U.S. support, the Israeli entity in and of itself is at major risk. And so, the question there for a lot of Israelis now is this interminable war. This kind of war after war after war. At what cost is this coming? And you could see that with the migration numbers. Again, massive numbers of Israelis are leaving. And massive numbers of Israelis have not gone back to the north, which is their northern border with Lebanon, even though there's been minor skirmishes, if any at all, but since that part of the overall regional war has stopped. And so there is a major question in strategic depth that Israel has, and whether it can afford to continue these wars that it's doing. Contrast this to Iran, a country that has about 1.7 million square kilometers, almost 1 million square miles of space. Massive, massive nation. It's a massive country that is being geopolitically supported by others in the region. We're talking about the likes of Russia, the likes of Pakistan, and not to mention economically the likes of China, because of very strong economic trade elements there. And then you have all these kind of groups that it has that still support it, these groups that it has all over the Gulf and the Levant. So they have strategic depth. So the question of how long this regional war can continue is while the nuclear war could basically de-escalate and stop, the regional war itself could actually continue for months, if not even longer. And that is the main question, I think, that a lot of what, Bibi, or as he likes to be called, has to deal with. I think he's nearing, and we've said it many times, unfortunately, and he continues to go, from war to war, but I think he's running out of wars. And so at this point, his society, his people, his political class are going to have to decide: do we want to continue this treading towards more and more war, or not? But I think his support from the U.S. is starting to wane. The comedic element of his warmongering is starting to basically tire even his stalwart supporters. So if I were Bibi, I would not be happy with where things are headed right now in Israel, and in terms of its relations with the U.S. or some of the other nations around.
I want to ask
Wissam,
Jim. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Wissam, I think that don't underestimate the amount of support that Bibi will have in the United States, in the U.S. Congress. I mean, they own it. AIPAC does. And the groups that, after all, that put the last nuclear deal on ice and Trump backed away from it, they're still there. They're still there, and they're still very powerful. The Israelis can go on so long as the U.S. will support and pay for it. Because the country can't sustain. Their stock markets are up. They say there's going to be. They look at this and they say things are going to be brighter. A lot of people see this somehow, some way. We're going to fix this Palestinian problem in a way the world never expected, and Donald Trump is behind us on that. How long he remains behind them remains to be seen. But I think that the Israelis have a confidence here that we're going to come out on top. They do have an advanced military. They do have advanced fighter jets, but they're much more strategically vital and effective at much shorter range than what they're having to deal with now with Iran. So there's questions about how long they would be able to support that war. It takes a tremendous amount of fuel tankers. The U.S. revealed some of what it was taking for the B-1 bombers and the number of refueling sessions that they had to carry out this mission. Of course, they came all the way over from the United States. But those are the same fuel tankers that I think are being pressed into service to aid the Israelis to keep up the pressure that they have now. How much weaponry they have for, those standoff attack missiles that they can launch into Iran. Uh, they have shown that they are interested in regime change. They are at least interested in weakening the regime. And we saw it from the early days of Israel's attacks on Iran. The attacks that took out high-level scientists, that took out high-level members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, that targeted the negotiator for the diplomatic efforts. Those kinds of attacks dismantle the regime from the top. Now, this latest strike that they had on Evin prison is another way that they can reinforce, well, we're going to try to take it to the opposition and see what that stirs up in Iran. I don't think it's going to have the result that they want. I think the Iranian people are going to come together more or less. They may not like the regime they have. They probably blame the regime they have for a lot of the problems that they face, mainly those economic problems that have been crippling for Iran. Uh, they want a better life just like everybody else in the region. Are the Israelis going to allow them to have it? Is the U.S. really going to want to get into a full-fledged war with a nation of 90 million people with the size that you described? All of those things, they might encourage the Iranian people to stay the course right now. If there's going to be any regime change, it's going to come a long time after this, maybe in the coming decade, as Iranians are able to evaluate what has come out of all of this. But we've got short-term issues to deal with, and I think number one on that list is Gaza and what happens to those 2.2 million Palestinians that are being driven into smaller and smaller areas and then targeted by the Israeli military. And it's sometimes by militias that have been hired by the United States. And, the groups that are involved there that are really profiteering off the misery of the Palestinian people who are really those people are being driven to the very edge of survival. And the United Nations and everybody else has made it clear to the world, and I'm still waiting to see what the world is going to do about it.
Unfortunately, we even Thora TV, we're not even covering the war in Gaza anymore because we're covering what's happening in the south of Lebanon. The war is so close to us now, and we're not taking time. Also, we want to help. We want to see how we can but the war is coming closer and closer. And I think today there was also in the old Gulf area warning to all U.S. Like in Lebanon to the all Lebanese American or to all foreign U.S. citizens to be aware to a state of emergency, not to go any places dangerous. Bases are under radar. It's a threat now in the region, and the impact on the economy and the canal, the Hormuz canal, the implication of the oil prices gonna for China, for India, Iran want to close that canal, and the implication is big on the economy, and that cannot. What do you think about that?
I don't think that Iran has. I mean, Iran can close the Hormuz Canal in a matter of minutes if it wanted to. The Houthis could bomb as well if they wanted to. I think the first messages coming out tend to be a little bit less severe from Iran. I think one way to decipher this is by who's doing the talking. And it's been the foreign minister of Iran, not the Revolutionary Guard, not the theocratic or the religious authorities, et cetera, et cetera. And so that tends to send a signal in a certain way, to, besides the message itself, right? In terms of the Hormuz, the canal itself, you have to also remember who benefits the most from it. I mean, the Chinese are massive beneficiaries of that as well. And the Chinese are, massive, I guess, trade partners with Iran. And so I think Iran would be shooting itself in the foot if it does that. And it would essentially almost make the entire world its own enemy. And one of the things that Iran has to its advantage is hindsight. They saw what, for example, what happened to Saddam. They saw what happened to Gaddafi. They saw what happened to these, kind of autocrats that wanted to challenge the world. And I think they're a little bit more strategic in their thinking than that. And you see it not just by their words, by their deeds. They're very meticulous, and they build things over decades. So they are very patient. They apply strategic patience. So I would not think that that they would precipitate such a step, particularly if the U.S. immediately came and said, "This is it. That we made our hit. We're done." If the U.S. had escalated and declared a war on Iran, an open war, I think, sure, that would be definitely one of the, tools at their disposal. But I don't think it's gotten to that point. So Iran has a lot of tools at its disposal right now, and it seems to be taking its time in making the decisions on both wars. So while it continues the tit for tat with Israel, with the ballistic missiles, etc., at the same time it's taking its time in its reaction to the bombing that happened in Iran. One final word here with respect to Gaza, which Jim mentioned. And first, thanks, Jim, for highlighting for highlighting what's still happening in Gaza on a daily basis, the killing, particularly the humanitarian killings, if they could be called that, by giving them food and then shooting at them. I don't really get what the point of this is.
It's the Hunger Games, according to the Palestinians.
It's the Hunger Games, yeah. And what's really kind of like mind-boggling in my mind is, how does a regime, and I'm talking about the Israeli regime right now, how does a regime, survive this? And I'm not talking about something that maybe the United States did to the American Indians 200 years ago. I'm talking about a regime in today's day and age survive something that is happening right next door for 2 years with all these massive killings. How does it really get out of this? I do not have the answer to this, as it pertains to Gaza, both on the humanitarian side, on the diplomatic side, the diplomatic cost of that, let alone the military, because they're still bogged down in Gaza. They still haven't had a victory in Gaza, believe it or not. So it's quite mind-boggling in my mind. And then I know Tarek is going to bring up some other regional nations, including Lebanon in a minute. But I wonder.
And I want to also ask you about today, like in couple of hours ago, they bombed southern of Lebanon. Uh, Severe strikes. It's like there is a war and the precocious war. Or, even though there is not the bullet been fired from Lebanon since the ceasefire, but it's like and the drones are all over Beirut, all over the time, all the time. It's like, be careful, we are here. Don't play with us. And the government trying to take the arms from the Palestinians, and they put that on hold for now, and from Hezbollah, this armed Hezbollah. What implications that might play on Lebanon? Do you think we're still in the danger zone? We still have round two. We might see round two. Wissam or Jim?
Well, I don't, you are in a better position perhaps to analyze the situation there. It depends on whether Hezbollah, this is a scenario. Iran is attacked by Israel and the United States. And the scenario that we were, for years told to expect was, well, that would bring in Hezbollah and all of their missiles would fly towards Israel. And well, that already happened. That's already been, disengaged. Uh, Hezbollah has been hurt badly. At least that's what I see from where I'm sitting. Uh, and Iran has been weakened as a result. The Houthis have been weakened as a result. Hamas has been weakened down to bare bones. It may still survive in Gaza as a resistance group because, that resistance will always be there so long as the occupation is there. But they may as well rename it into something else because I think it's nothing but a shadow of its former self. They have hollowed out these pro-Iran, anti-Israel organizations that they have relied on to hold as a sword over the Israelis for many, many years. And it's now come down to just Iran facing off with not just Israel, but the United States. What it means for Lebanon has a lot to do with how strong Hezbollah really is still inside Lebanon. How many people have a willingness to go on and confront a country that is clearly willing to bomb anything and everything to get at its enemies? And that means entire apartment blocks to get to one Hezbollah figure in Lebanon, uh, entire cities in Gaza in order to get to the tunnels or to the leadership of Hamas. So it's a pretty bleak outlook, I would think. And I'm wondering how much support is there, how much fire is left in the supporters of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Well, if you take the what I think Katz said the yesterday, he said actually was it on Israel's channel 14 in some commentary that was happening with Katz. He said, well, after we finish from Iran, we're going to go back and finish Lebanon, and we're going to finish. And he started listing everybody that he wanted to finish off. I think they still believe that Hezbollah has something like 10,000 missiles. To answer your question, Tarek, I think what Lebanon really needs is for the government to step up, and they need to forcefully first start disarming the Palestinian factions, which is in agreement with the Palestinian Authority, by the way. President Mahmoud Abbas himself spoke with the president of Lebanon, and they agreed that that would happen. Why it hasn't happened, I really don't know. But the Lebanese need to be a little bit more bold in their moves. They need to go in step and take arms away and slowly but surely start protecting the people.
They need leadership. It's the core problem that Lebanon has had is leadership. And
Correct.
it has been seen that Hezbollah actually represented a less corrupt presence in the government than the existing presence that had been inherited from decades of, I wouldn't say misrule, but it would certainly, it wasn't a real rule. Lebanon has had the problem that its government has always been perceived as weak, much like its military.
Well, it's time, I think, for a lot of the peoples in the region to step up. And the message, I mean, if you take a step back and auto all of these wars, the message that resonates is if you don't step up and take the reins of your country and basically control your country, just like all other countries are, have sovereignty and governance and all that kind of stuff, then you're going to have the likes of Israel, et cetera, basically take advantage of it. And this is the main message. So what Jim is saying is true. In the past, the Lebanese have had very corrupt governments. The question now is, with all of this happening and with the cost that has been borne by the Lebanese people, is the Lebanese government willing to step up and basically assume at this moment, I'm not saying sometime in the future, now, assume responsibility over its people and its territory? So in many ways, we're always the Lebanese are always waiting for, okay, let's see what the Israelis do, or let's see what the Americans do, or let's see what the Russians or the Syrians do. Well, maybe it's time for the Lebanese to start seeing what they're going to do.
What would they do?
And stepping up and basically forcefully implementing what they need for their own interest, which is
We have big hopes on the new government and the new president, and hopefully they can show this leadership And also, I want to ask about Syria and about Jordan and the region. Just
Yeah, well,
let's see the
Syria goes right
implication
hand in hand with that.
in Syria.
Syria goes hand in hand with that because for decades, Syria, the Assad dynasty, really
Exactly.
kept a heavy hand on Lebanon and tried to control the politics, whether it was through assassinations or whether it was through armed actions, support for Hezbollah, facilitating the weapons transfers from Iran to Hezbollah. Now that's gone.
Yeah.
And I think it puts Lebanon in a bit of a different situation where Hezbollah may find itself much more isolated. But,
All
that
down to
doesn't
Russia with the
fix
money.
the government or the lack of government that Lebanon has enjoyed for so many decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Syria thought it, I mean, Syria is a bit of an enigma. There was a big explosion yesterday, and so
Yeah.
nobody really knows what's going to end up happening there. But as it pertains
They
to
say Al Qaeda, people from Al Qaeda, they blow themselves. There was a leakage of some conversation from people, foreign people. I don't know if you saw the footage.
well, that's what some are saying, right?
Yeah.
But nobody really knows just yet who did this and for what reason. So, but regardless of this, I think its implications towards the future are important, and it needs to be considered as well. But coming back to what what the likes of OWN, what the likes of those decisions that are being taken, I guess, they still need to be taken. And you can't only look at what's happening in your vicinity to make your decision. I think you can make that decision on your own and take some risks, yes, but hopefully it'll be for the benefit of everybody.
And we're gonna move to Jordan. Jordan, rockets over Jordan. They might move some people from Gaza to Jordan and then to Egypt. What's the implication, the war on Jordan and Egypt? What do you think, Jim?
Well, I think that's the last thing that Jordan and King Abdullah would like to see is dragging them into this genocide, into the ethnic cleansing. Uh, Jordan is going to stand up. It needs U.S. support. It's going to stand up and do what it can. It would much prefer to be shooting down Iranian missiles on the way to Israel than accepting more Palestinian refugees uh, as part of an ethnic cleansing campaign by Bibi Netanyahu. You know, Jordan is like many of the other countries in the region, I think. Israel floated this idea that, great idea here. It's a very expensive war. Yes, we understand that. We think the Gulf states who stand to, you would think Arab states would stand to benefit from Iran being taken down a notch or two, and this whole nuclear threat that sword being taken from over their heads. And they thought, well, maybe the UAE and other countries should give money to Israel to go ahead and fight this war. And man, I think the reaction was instantaneous. There are no way, want no part of it. People don't want to be involved in this. I don't think the US wanted to be involved, but hey, Trump got us involved in it. It's his war now, too, alongside Bibi. And we were already deeply involved in what was going on in Gaza. But our allies, especially ones that are as dependent upon the United States as Jordan is, and I know that Jordan is very dependent on the United States for aid and assistance, for diplomatic support. Uh, it's going to be a very risky thing for Jordan to get involved in any of these politics that favor the plans that Mr. Netanyahu may have for the Palestinian people. It just isn't going to fly. Donald Trump is in a fantasy land, we'll build a resort in Gaza. I mean, this nonsensical stuff. People are beginning to question his mental acuity at this point. Uh, and that's part of politics in the United States. But when you get to a country like Jordan, when you get to a country like Lebanon, that the U.S. has a history with, and they want to support, uh, it would be a good time for the U.S. to consider doing that now, and not caving in to every wish and whim of the Israeli government right now. Because, and I know I'm changing the topic a little bit here, but what's one of the reasons that Netanyahu wants to continue these wars? Because he doesn't want anybody looking directly at October 7th and saying, ladies and gentlemen, the reason that Israel suffered the worst intelligence failure in the history of the state was because of the arrogance of Bibi Netanyahu and his supporters. They were arrogant. They thought they could buy and use Hamas. He even encouraged his people to send money, funnel money from Qatar to Hamas as a means of controlling the Palestinians and preventing a Palestinian state. And having done so, he actually put him in a position of power. And he was warned about it by his own troops, females, female soldiers that were tasked with watching what Hamas was up to. They were trying to warn them. Now, this hasn't all come out in public because Bibi Netanyahu says, well, there's no way we can have an investigation of October 7th and my role in it until and unless we're done fighting. We're in a war situation now. And therefore, we can't bring all of this stuff in. He's hoping that he can put enough distance between October 7th and himself to somehow salvage his very, well, monstrous political career. And I wonder if he'll be able to do it. I wonder.
A friend told me today, it was like it was orchestrated October 7 until today. If you look at it, it was like orchestrated to arrive to this day today. This is a conspiracy theory. With this, do you think it's true, Wissam?
No, whether it's true or not is, I think, besides the point. It's happened, and now I don't personally believe it was, but even if it did, the results are the same. But I think the dynamics that were launched are pretty self-evident, and I don't think you can put the genie back in the box or in the bottle. And so, at this point, really, I mean, looking forward. It's a choice that has to be made by each one of these different, I guess, parties to what's going on. And it makes me think about some very hard choices that were made at difficult or at different points. And then you see the end results. I was listening the other day to an Egyptian guy, and he was describing how in the 70s, how the decisions that were made then basically kind of had or projected themselves for 30, 40 years on everything, the economy, the development, the society, all of that kind of stuff. They were tough decisions that were made back then. And I think we're at that juncture right now. So regardless of how it happened, you're at a juncture and you have to make these decisions. So what are those decisions that need to be made? And do you kind of swallow what has to the medicine now for it to really be good for the enterprise going forward or not? And I think we should. I think some of these different, if you look at, for example, Lebanon, I think Lebanon is at a juncture with great opportunities going forward, but tough decisions have to be made. And those decisions, have to be made with wisdom and patience and with a look for supporting, the people at the end of the day. And this could be economic, it could be technological, it could be developmental, it could be social, but also, security and all that kind of stuff. So to me, also these guys in Gaza, et cetera, they also have to make those decisions at some point, right? Right now, they can't make any decision because they're under very, very difficult circumstances, obviously. But at some point, they're also going to have to make their own decisions. And every one of these different elements will have to make, or different parties will have to make their decisions. So I don't know if this answers your question, but to me, this is, I always look at the, glass half full, and I see this as a moment of being a glass half full.
I wanna move Egypt. I want to speak about Egypt a bit. Also, long because we discussed a lot of Gaza, a lot of eyes on Egypt for future development for the people of Gaza, for the future, and because there is no home left, there is no land left, no houses, no nothing, and they're gonna open the border one day and tell them this is the promised land. How's it gonna happen? Yani, there are people, 2 million people. You said they are. I don't know their future. What's gonna happen? I don't know what they did to God to be there. Yani, I don't know, and I believe in reincarnation. I think life is not fair for these people. They're being
Well,
tortured.
yeah, Tarek, we can say that it's not fair for them. You know what? We're not being fair to ourselves either. That we should stand by and watch an entire population be bombed until, there are tens of thousands of children who've been killed, who continue to be, dismembered, decapitated in continuing bombings and attacks. Snipers continue to shoot them, pick them off. How
Anytime,
does the world let this happen? This is what is going to be remembered. This Holocaust that is happening in Gaza,
yeah, yeah.
this genocide that is happening in Gaza, has to be addressed by the international community. How is Israel able to keep it going? Why is the United States supporting anything that they are doing? Why have we furnished them with all of these weapons? We need to say, who are we? What do we stand for? What kind of human beings would allow this to happen, to go this far? We can say that Bibi's a madman, and that's perfectly fair. But who are we? We have stood by and let this happen. The major countries of Europe, many of the people in the United States, we're seeing Israel destroy itself, eat itself, and its image around the world. But that isn't going to stop the suffering of these Palestinians who, in no way, deserve the fate that has been meted out to them. I just wonder when we're all going to wake up.
Well said. They started still on.
Yeah, well, I know we wanted to hit on Iran, and it is a huge issue. Uh, and this has been a moment that is, everybody's feared, and we were supposed to fear it, and the way that it was going to affect all of us. And yet, at this point in time, we don't know where it's leading. And that's the most honest answer, Wissam, that you and I can give. We have to wait and see how people react. How will the Iranians react? We talked about some of their options. How will the Americans react when they don't get immediate what Trump called unconditional surrender from the Iranians? Of course, he would love that, but he's also a president that backs up on everything that he declares. The United States has major economic problems. It can't afford this war as much as anything else, Wissam. And Trump knows that. Trump knows that a lot of his domestic ideas and policies are causing great harm to this economy. And now he's made a foreign policy decision that is causing even more harm and concern around the world. The oil prices are up, our stock prices are low. Israel's stock prices may be doing well, but they're in a completely different boat. You know what that is? That's the boat where US taxpayers pay their bills. Even though we say we can't afford medical care for our own people, we can't afford Social Security benefits for our own people, we pay Israel's bills so they can do all of that inside Israel. It leaves them in a completely different space. Will that change? Well, I think it's going to take a different government than this one in order to do it. And I'm not going to predict what happens next in this conflict between Iran, the US, and Israel. I think Israel and Iran will continue to go at it for a little while, but even they have to be exhausted from all of this. The world needs a break. It needs a pause to sit back and think, what are we going to do next?
Like Russia and Ukraine, it's gonna take that long,
Well,
or
I mean, Russia and Ukraine, Tarek, I don't even want to get into it at this point. It's another expensive conflict, very expensive conflict. And perhaps,
Expensive and
Vladimir
non-necessary.
Putin, yeah, expensive and unnecessary. What have we done to ourselves in this world? I mean, if we want to really look at it, bad leadership has really taken us down some dark pathways in our world and the way that we have left it today.
what's
I
the
do have
future
one
of
final
Gulf?
question for you, Jim,
Sure.
because I know we're coming towards the end of the session. In retrospect, you were there, back in the day, and you saw how it all panned out. Do you see any reverberations from that back in the day to what's going on now?
Well, certainly, you can see how Iran infected the region, if you will, with these resistance movements that were really part of a larger hegemony. And you can see how Israel continued to press its own hegemony, how it has avoided the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, how it has gotten a free pass from the United States and almost unlimited funding for its military, and how it has used that military, you know, to feature its weaponry, at the Paris Air Show and other places, tested on the Palestinian people. Uh, we're no further ahead on the question of Palestine because nobody has ever really pursued peace. Benjamin Netanyahu has always stood against peace in the region. And when I look at, the changes in Iran, there was so much hope and there was so much possibility for the Iranian people, and it has all been taken down a singular road towards greater and expanding power. Not economic power, but military power, troublemaking, if you will. And that has been disastrous for a country like Lebanon. I think more than any other, Lebanon has paid the price for that.
Very good. Yeah.
Syria, a completely new government. Uh, the Assad dynasty is out. It has a chance to forge new relations, but we really don't see what that government's capable of doing right now. It's on its knees, obviously, economically. As I look back across all of the years from standing in, the Beirut barracks of the U.S. Marine Corps outside the Beirut airport, and see the building down and hear the command come over the radio to lock and load. 240 plus Marines lost their lives that day in Beirut. It was the multinational force, a peacekeeping mission that was taken to shambles by Syria and Iran. Uh, so it just, I look at it, we seem to be back there, don't we? We seem to be back there where the buildings are down, the casualties are being counted. And the question now comes into, well, what do we do? What do we do now? Some have said that this is a chance to rebuild. This is a chance for a new start. This is a chance for us to reconsider the way that we have done things in the past. And I think there's some truth in that. But I seriously question whether Bibi Netanyahu or President Donald Trump are really going to rethink the way that they've done things. Because as much as it depends on what Iran does, or what Lebanon does, or what Syria does, how Jordan can help, how Egypt might position itself, what the Palestinians, whatever they can do, it really depends on what attitude we all have in looking at our world. Do we want a different Middle East, or we just want to continue this street fight that has gone on for decades? I hope that we want something new. I hope we seize an opportunity and change gears. But boy, it's going to require massive change for the U.S. and for Israel to accept that.
Tarek, back to
Definitely, we
you.
are going to new era. Definitely, we are going to new era, new Middle East, new geopolitical, size Pico, new hopefully to the better, but uh, I hope so. I would love to end this conversation to give you a chance to say anything you like. I would like to say thank you, Jim and Wissam. If you'd like to say anything, please go ahead, and great to see you again, and hopefully in better circumstances.
Same here. Just hopeful, you know, for the best and for some tough decisions to be made, and hopefully it'll bring a new dawn. Uh, but yeah, it's these are some tough times.
Tarek, I just want to say
Jim,
thank
thank you very
you
much.
for bringing us together to discuss this because it is an important topic. And I know all those that are watching, you wish we had real answers for you. Well, we can't, if we're going to tell you the truth, because unlike Whiskey Pete Hegseth, you know, I know that the intelligence readings didn't change. And while they can make things up, the leadership in Israel can make things up, we shouldn't make things up here. Tough times, tough decisions lie ahead for everybody. I just hope and pray that our leaders are up to it. I hope they're willing to give peace a chance, to give rebuilding a chance, to give a chance to a new way forward.
They have, I think they have to fix it from the fundamentals, from the basis, from Gaza. There is a problem. I think this is the core of the problem, and from there on. Thank you very much, and I hope we answer some questions. Thank you very much for being with us. Tawra TV, Jem, and Isa. Thank you.